I like about these transitions is it's left open to interpretation whether you're clapping for David's presentation or for my arrival. We probably have different. Hey, there we go. All right. So I wanted to give credit to Professor David Novog, who's our UNINI chair, who shared some of his slides. He's the one who really is the technical expert in small modular reactors. I'm very passionate about them and excited about their deployment opportunities. But Dave is the one. So if there's anything in the presentation you don't like, his email is right there. If you do like it, actually, Juliet apparently polished up my slides a little bit unbeknownst to me, so probably the credit goes there. So as Dave alluded to, I mean, Canada as a nation has a big stake in nuclear and has been playing an oversized role since the inception of nuclear power. That includes, as was mentioned, that Ontario generates the majority of its electricity through nuclear power. But really, that's the only place in Canada that's dominated by nuclear at this point. There's small pockets of it that are going to be growing, but we're also a major producer of uranium, and most of the uranium that we produce actually goes overseas. So we are part of developing a very secure and supply chain for nuclear, and that role within the world is becoming increasingly important for Canada. The sort of schedule of this talk, and I'm going to go quickly through it because I know from this morning's sessions that you've been covering much of the need to consider a carbon-free future, but there's like, where are we at in terms of the energy to environment landscape? I'll give you, there is hope. A little bit about what Canada was able to do in the past within nuclear, and then the bits that Dave was telling you a little bit about what this branching off of different types of nuclear reactors that can perform different duties for society. So where we're at is things are not good. You know, carbon emissions continue, CO2 emissions continue to increase. And we're now at the point where climate change is manifesting itself on a regular basis, essentially without dispute. Just the storms, the rapid intensification of the storms recently into hurricanes was clear evidence for that. And so this is, it's a situation that's been urgent for a long time now. And I think, certainly for myself, it lends itself to thinking, whereas a decade or 2 decades ago, I might have been thinking, oh, we need revolutionary new thoughts. I still think that's true, but pragmatism has to come in. We have to think of what are the clear pathways that we can begin to take that are actually going to make a difference. This is data from the European Union. So at first I looked at it when I saw the slides from Dave and I said, not a single Caribbean country is here. And then, oh, okay, that's okay, it's Europe. There wasn't Canada on there either. But what it's looking at is where within the European Union, which is one of the places that was ahead of the curve in this, do nation states have adequate ambitions in terms of their emission targets? Most of them do not. Do they have adequate policies to meet their ambitions such as they are? Most of them do not, right? Only 3 states within the European Union have both adequate emission ambition and policies that can credibly get them there, right? And the rest are abject failures. And of course, that lower left quadrant is all of the states that have neither ambition nor the policy to get them to their limited ambitions. So is there hope? Well, we pause a moment before we give you hope, but there will be hope. And this is a little bit dated, but it's the idea that experts have begun the long process, and this is ongoing and continuing and updated, that looks at scenarios that we might take and what would be the practical outcomes of those scenarios, right? And what are the choices that society really has in terms of dealing with this crisis. And so there's a number of options and a growing list of options that society can think to take that have different technological bases to them. This slide I'll sort of skip. Wind and solar, incredibly important. Dave in this slide is making the point that the battery technology, which is something I'm very familiar with, is really unproven at scale, and that there are challenges in the supply chain, and even at scale, it has limitations as to what it can actually do. But this is, I think, the more interesting slide, which shows there are multiple ways to hold the temperature rise to 2 degrees as an arbitrary number. And they really branch off into 3 categories. And here's, I think, where the pragmatism has to settle in. The low demand one is radical changes in how we live our lives. We all, we consume food that's been produced within 50 kilometers of where we live. We walk to work. All of the things that we have been doing and should be doing within our own personal spaces to limit our carbon footprint. But it's taking that on a massive scale, right? This conference, quite frankly, would have to have been virtual. You would have to, Google, Microsoft would not be allowed to set up all of those data centers that are taking place, all of these things. For me, pragmatically, this is not a politically viable solution. I cannot imagine, in particular, the United States ever agreeing to the policies that would be required to limit its need for energy to that point. And so then you're left with the high demand as developing countries are able to increase their prosperity, and there is a dead straight line between a nation's prosperity as measured by economic GDP and its energy usage. So, and there's no deviations from that, really, no big deviations across the world. So that's something that means we need more energy, and that means that we need energy that is carbon free. So that's saying, again, as Dave did earlier, that's now saying the same thing that I just said. So within Canada, we've been through a massive rollout of a carbon-free electricity source, which was nuclear. And I'll run down this list of Canada's nuclear history to the bottom, which is 1971 when Pickering, which is just on the other side of Toronto, was opened up. The first station was opened up. And from 1971 through to the early 90s, Ontario generated over 15 gigawatt of nuclear power capability, right, to meet the majority of Ontario's needs at that time, especially with our hydro sources that we already had. And at about the same time frame, about 5 gigawatts of the same technology was exported to various jurisdictions around the world. And a bragging point here that Canadian technology was homegrown, and the supply chain for it was developed within Canada. So that's something that we were able to do. We weren't just importing a solution from another jurisdiction. Today we need a little bit more than that, but not extraordinarily more than that. Maybe we should be ambitious and say we need twice as much, but in about the same time frame. So surely we can do, with what we have available to us today, surely we can meet that need, at least for Ontario and for Canada. So we should be able to manage that. This is a different example. I mentioned before about the linearity between economic prosperity and energy usage. That doesn't mean you have to have a straight line between prosperity and carbon footprint. And the country that's showing that decoupling the best and for the longest is France. So France started a massive build out of its nuclear capabilities back around the same time that we did, actually, in the 70s. And you can really see how those curves diverge, that their economic prosperity is not connected to their footprint. And now if you look Our World in Data is a great source for this. You can see the decoupling that's happening in many, many countries around the world as they bring on renewables and nuclear power into their mix. So what's new in nuclear? The current situation in Canada is that the rest of the country is finally beginning to get it. Quebec, with its massive hydro resources, never needed nuclear. They're starting to need it now. They're currently importing power from Canada. Alberta has begun to show us a great interest. They were, of course, the fossil fuel generator within the Canadian system and an economic powerhouse because of it. Saskatchewan is going to be one of the early adopters. New Brunswick is not on here. So nuclear is going to be spreading across Canada, and that drives up the need to 50 gigawatts, which is still something that I think is attainable. One of the challenges is that previous scale-up was achieved by massive government investment that nobody sees on the horizon right now. We're going to need different economic models to drive this growth, and we don't really know what those are going to be. We've had some recent performance that have been a mixed bag, but generally speaking, the nuclear industry seems to be getting much better if you look at times to completion and relationship between budgets. So there was a point at which people said every nuclear plant runs way over budget, way over time. That's becoming less relevant to the conversation. And really what I'll get to next is it's driven a diversification of the types of solutions that are there. So previously, we'd always focused on large conventional nuclear, which kept getting bigger and more complex and more efficient as we did it, but every build was a new build. And that's kind of a model that still continues today. But now there's this concept of small modular reactors. No, don't keep making it better. Just stick with one design that's good enough, the way that we produce cars, and drive down the cost through learning curves, through modularity, through manufacturing methods. And then micro reactors that Dave was talking about, which can be deployed, which can actually be put onto a back of a large truck or a ship and delivered where you need it, can actually be made in factories and deployed. So these are multiple solutions for different kinds of problems. I'm going to skip over this a little bit because my colleague Jim Cotton is going to talk in a great deal more detail about how small modular reactors actually become more flexible in terms of what you're able to do with them. And in fact, this is probably something that Dave Novak stole from Jim Cotton to put into his talk because it looks very familiar to me. So this is the idea that you really are producing a need for the community. So this is actually a very exciting opportunity, and Dave alluded to this. It's an exciting opportunity for McMaster because we have an existing reactor that really is something of a Swiss Army knife. We can actually work and prove out solutions that people are proposing, and we're well in the process of doing that. The Net Zero Community Project is probably the most ambitious example of that. There are many, many smaller examples where we're working on trying to help make this possibility in terms of as part of our mix in the future, and make that, de-risk that, and bring it to the point where combination of public and private investment can really take it to the finish line. And so with that, thank you very much.